Okay, November 16th, 2021 is called into session. Mr. Curry, would you mind leading us in prayer?
Sure. Let us pray. Dear Lord, we're thankful for the ability to serve. We ask that you keep us and guide us with wisdom and grace as we serve the children, the families of this community. In your name we pray. Amen.
I recommend approval of the agenda dated November the 16th, 2021.
Motion?
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the recommendation and approval of the agenda dated November 16th, 2021. Any discussion or changes that need to be made? If there are none, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Item C, restructuring of the board. Mr. President,
Thank you. All right. So by law, each year we are required to restructure the board and vote on new officers, leadership for the board, and we have reached that time. So I am going to ask for any nominations for both president and vice president of the board. I'll open the floor to nominations for president.
Nominate Nathan Curry as president.
Need a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the nomination of Mr. Nathan Curry to be the new president of the Madison County Board of Education. Any other nominations? If there are none, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Congratulations, Nathan.
Thank you.
We will go ahead and switch chairs.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Wise, for
Be-
your
as,
service.
I was going to say, before he does that, I want to say it's been an honor and a pleasure to serve as the board president for 3 years. And I am honored and humbled that all of you had your faith and confidence in me to lead the board for that long. And I wish Mr. Curry all the best and in his new job as president of this board. I know he'll do fine. He was a great vice president, and I know that he will just continue that trend in this chair. But thank you all very much for giving me the privilege and honor of serving as your board president for the last 3 years. I truly appreciate it. So thank you.
All right.
Take my
It's been
pen.
real sitting next to you.
I miss you, Nathan.
I'll miss you.
switch it around now.
Switch it around.
Feels empty over here.
Fix this chair first.
Oh yeah, sorry, Nathan. Let me fix this chair.
All right. Move my stuff out. All right, here we are. Well, Dave, you look different from this perspective.
I think I started on that end when I first came on the board, moved to the middle, and now I'm all the way back at this end.
All right, we're going to carry on, and we're going to open the floor for nominations for vice president.
Nominate Dave Wise for vice president.
I have a nomination for Dave Weiss for vice president. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Welcome, Mr. Vice President. I look forward to serving with you for the next,
Me too.
at least the next year.
At least the next year.
Yes, sir. All right.
All right. You ready?
Being an Indian over here.
You need your stuff?
Is this mine or yours?
That's mine.
Yeah, where'd mine go? All right, never mind. I'll share with Sherry.
You want your physical packet?
No, you're good.
Okay.
You ready?
Where's our request address board? We have 4 requests to address the board tonight. I'm going to make sure these individuals are here before we begin. Ms. Belinda Newell. Ms. Baglarta Patty. Mr. Kyle Brookhouse. Okay. And Ms. Hillary Brookhouse. All right, thank you. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Ms. Belinda Newell is not here. Ms. Baglarta Patty. All right. So you know that, I think you've been here before, right, Miss Patty?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and read this comment here. Your comments will be limited to 3 minutes. In the event you wish to address the board on an issue involving the general reputation and character, physical condition, professional competence, mental health, or in some instances job performance of an individual, or confidential student information, the board will hear your comments in executive session. If you're unsure whether your comments should be made in executive session, please see Board Attorney Cynthia Thompson.
Okay.
All right. Let me go ahead and get your time set up here.
My name is Baglarka Patty, and I know that at the last meeting you decided to drop the mask mandate and make masks optional, so you may wonder why some of us are still here today. The reason I still find it important to speak is because I fear what is around the corner. Will you make masked students again, or push for our children to get vaccinated? Where will these policies end? See, I cannot help but feel that you dropped the mask mandate and went mask optional for the wrong reason. You keep focusing on the number of infections, disregarding the data that consistently shows that our students are not at risk of dying of COVID. You also seem to disregard the fact that herd immunity may have already been achieved in our student population, given the number of the positive cases you have so diligently tracked over the last year. It is clear that your policies are in lockstep with the CDC, Rochelle Walensky, and Dr. Fauci, who infamously claimed this year that questioning him is the same as questioning science. He denied, by the way, that this virus came from a lab and lied about whether the NIH or the NIAID funded gain-of-function research or not. The real Anthony Fauci is not a man of integrity, and he has done more damage to this country than we will ever know. As a Christian parent, I take it very seriously when the Bible tells us in Psalm 1 that blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked. The Apostle Paul reinforces that teaching in the New Testament when he writes to the believers in Ephesus, highlighting the fact that Christ equips the church with everything they need to be mature. He writes this in chapter 4, I believe. Then we will no longer be infants, tossed back and forth by the waves, and blown here and there by every wind of teaching, and by the cunning and craftiness of people in their deceitful scheming. The message cannot be more relevant. Who we listen to and follow matters. Do we listen to the science that is bought and paid for and propagated? Or do we listen to the ever-increasing number of doctors and nurses who risk their reputation and careers to speak up and tell the truth? By the way, there's a Yale epidemiologist who said recently on television, I believe, that if the schools are mandating your children to be vaccinated, pull them out of school. There is absolutely no reason for that. For you to decide what to do, the stakes are very high. Your decision affects so many lives, not just for this year, but for many years to come. Peter McCullough, who is an internist, cardiologist, professor of medicine, editor-in-chief of 2 medical journals.
Thank you, Ms.
said this
Bulgalaka.
recently. Let me finish this sentence. I'm almost done.
Okay.
He said this recently at a Health Summit. This is not just a battle of mankind versus the virus, but it is a battle of good versus evil.
Okay.
I'm asking you tonight to stand up for what is really at stake here in this fight, our children and their well-being,
Thank you, Ms.
physical and
Thank you, Ms.
emotional,
Bulgalaka.
and ultimately the freedom of all of us.
I understand. Thank you. It's fine. Thank you. Mr. Kyle Brookhouse.
They're a match set.
Good.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I just want to remind you that you don't have the right to make medical decisions for my child, nor does the state, nor does the federal government. You guys need to get prepared for what's about to come from the government. The government has gone even more rogue with their recent mandates. They are trying to force unvaccinated people to get vaccinated for protection, while simultaneously telling the vaccinated to take a booster because the protection doesn't work. They even admit the vaccine doesn't prevent infection or transmission. This is insanity. This is not about health and safety. This is about control, and it's always been about control. Now they're pushing this shot on our kids. We all know that COVID poses less of a threat to kids than the flu, but they are still pushing this experimental gene therapy on them. They admit they don't know the long or even short-term safety effects of this shot. During the FDA's 5 to 11-year-old emergency use authorization hearing, panel member Dr. Eric Rubin stated, "We're never going to learn about how safe the vaccine is until we start giving it." Pfizer's briefing material for this hearing states, "The number of participants in the current clinical development program is too small to detect any potential risk of myocarditis associated with vaccination. Long-term safety of COVID-19 vaccine in participants 5 to less than 12 years of age will be studied in a 5-year follow-up study to evaluate long-term consequences of post-vaccination myocarditis and pericarditis." These are the people you've been listening to the last year and a half. They continue to deceive. We have over 40-plus years of positive safety data for ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine, yet they claim there isn't enough data, so these people banned it. The same people tell us we have zero data for experimental vaccines, but we have to put it in kids' arms as fast as possible. The Pfizer CEO, a veterinarian, recently said those speaking against his vaccine are criminals. The head of one of the largest corporate felons is calling people that speak truth about his product criminals. Pfizer has a long documented history of deceiving people and has paid billions in fines and damages. Yet now our government wants us to trust everything they're telling us. The federal government is already making plans to force this on you. They are going to tie federal funding to you mandating vaccination as a requirement to go to school. The CDC already gave the ADPH $40 million this summer, and the ADPH continues to shovel their lies and propaganda. They're going to force this, and they're going to force the teaching of critical race theory and the perversion of genders on our teachers and our children. And they're going to hold federal money as a ransom until you comply. You need to wake up. You need to recognize this for what it is. This is evil, and evil is coming after our kids. This is spiritual warfare against the deceiver, and you need to get prepared to fight against it. We know the struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, authorities, and powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. God is not going to bless the school system if it continues to turn a blind eye to this evil. If you don't believe that, you need to stop praying before every board meeting. I call on this board to start formulating a plan to become independent of federal funding.
Thank you, Mr.
And start
Brookhouse.
praying for God's guidance in the decisions you make.
Thank you, Mr. Brookhouse. Ms. Hillary Brookhouse.
As you know, I'm a teacher at Buckhorn High School, and I just wanted to tell you all that lifting this mask mandate and eliminating exclusion was the most important thing you could do for our students. Thank you. Do you know how it feels as a teacher to call roll and to see that none of my kids are absent? It's amazing. Having all of my kids back in my classroom is awesome. The joy I have seen return to the hallways and classroom is remarkable. So many smiles, so many interactions with each other during group work and just in general in the hallways. Kids volunteer left and right to read aloud in class again. Laughter is in the room again. I have actually had to start asking classes to quiet down again, which I know sounds funny, but I'm happy about because they are socializing again. I heard a girl speak for the first time this semester. During the mask mandate, she would normally just nod when I asked her questions, and she would send me her questions through Canvas. It is so good to hear her voice. Energy is high, and not just for students, teachers as well. Teachers are interacting more and encouraging each other more. We're smiling at each other in the hallways. Conversations are happening in the hallways. I have missed getting to see my students have that aha moment where they understand a tough topic and they look up at me and smile because they finally get it. Well, the aha moments have returned to the classroom, and these smiles are priceless. I thank y'all for this. However, there are still many restrictions that need to be removed from our schools. Leaving the schools at level 1 is still negatively affecting our students. Veterans Day programs were canceled in many of our schools. Grandparents' Day at elementary schools, canceled. Parents eating lunch with their elementary children at school, canceled. Remember that little boy, the pre-K student from the picture I showed you at the last meeting? He still eats by himself, as do his classmates, because we're still at level 1 where social distancing is required. Please take note that COVID numbers have continued dropping in our schools, even with mask optionals, and please return our schools back to level 0. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brookhouse. Well, I want to thank all three of you all for coming and advocating on behalf of children and families, and we're going to continue on our board meeting.
Informational items, COVID update. What I basically want to just kind of talk about was just our numbers. Just kind of want to update everyone and make sure that everyone understands what the, say what?
I'm just, Nathan, I'm sorry. The agenda that is being shown is not the agenda that we have here.
Correct. We are missing the COVID update.
We're missing the informational items.
We're missing,
It says informational items, but it doesn't. Yeah.
correct. Yeah, we have COVID update on your paper, but on the slide, we do not
I
have.
just,
Yeah. Okay. Well, it should be COVID update first.
yeah.
Of course. Okay. Great.
So we're right. That was just not.
Yeah,
There it is. There you go.
that's the one.
Sorry, Nick.
Okay.
Sorry, Alan.
No, I'm glad we got that straight. Just COVID update. Currently, we have 16 students who are COVID positive, and that's district-wide, and that is 0.07 hundredths of 1%. So that's a good number for us right now. We have currently 2 faculty members. We're going to continue to watch our numbers, but right now our numbers are fantastic. They're great. And we pray that we'll stay in that area. So that's all I wanted to basically bring to you all and to make sure everyone was aware of that. Any questions?
I guess the point about going to level 0, what's the thought on that?
Well, what we wanted to do is to continue a phased approach when we start looking at moving and phasing from mask. We phase from mask, then we'll continue to look at our numbers through the holiday, and if it's warranted, after we continue to look at all of our data points, then we will consider moving to level 0, but not before we get an opportunity to move through this particular time to make sure that we are actually where we need to be before we do that. Some of the protocols are still in place. We wanted to make sure we keep the protocols in place while masking was optional, just to make sure that we are clear of the issues that we might have. So we're still looking at it, and it's a possibility at some point that we will move back to level 0. And we hope to move back to level 0. But right now, we're keeping kids in school. We have very few students out. And so it's a transitional moving approach. It's not a, all in all type approach. And I know that's a cautious move, but I'd rather be cautious and move and then make a decision based on examining all the data and the information as we move forward. So that's why we are not at
You
0.
didn't set parameters for that, right?
We did not set parameters for that. However, with our numbers looking the way they are, and we're looking at holistic data numbers, then we can evaluate moving them that way.
When you say the holidays, is that Thanksgiving?
Thanksgiving, Christmas, holidays, yes.
Whole.
The whole, yes.
Have we seen any uptick in any other illnesses in our schools, given the change in the seasons, or?
We have not. We haven't seen any significant change in it, uptick or anything.
Okay.
All right, instructional department update. Well, we're going to do we're going to change that around and let Tracy Ray go first. She's going to do the 2022-23 academic guide. Ms. Ray?
Hi. I believe I know most of you, but I think this is maybe the first time that I've served in this capacity. I've been a building principal for the last several years and am now serving as supervisor of instruction for our secondary schools. And even though it seems like the year just started, we're actually finalizing our academic guide for 22 and 23. So we're not very many changes that I need to make you aware of, but there are just a few. Met with our building principals and with Michael Romine, who is over our Career Tech Center. And again, just a couple things that I want to make you aware of. Okay, let's see.
Hey, Ms. Ray, can you pull your microphone down, make sure everyone can hear you?
I'm short.
That's okay.
There we go. Is that better?
That is better. Thank you.
Okay. The first one is very minor, but in our college prep curriculum, we had failed to mention that we offer art, and we do have a school that offers AP Studio Art. So we did make that addition. The next change is referring to online courses at local schools. While we do have MCVA as a virtual option for students who want to go completely virtual, our local schools have a little flexibility and have some access to those Edgenuity courses to supplement a regular schedule as well. But we did think it was necessary to put some guidelines in there. So by limiting it to 2 courses per semester, per student, that just ensures that that student is also having some face-to-face classes in addition. And then the last one is an update to our fee schedule. In speaking with Mr. Romine, he said that due to the rising cost of materials, that it was necessary to increase some of his courses to $40. In speaking with him, he's choosing to raise the lower price courses so that he can keep the upper level courses the same. He's trying to make it to where $40 is the max of any course. So these are the only programs that are being affected by it right now. And of course, we have the fee waivers still for students who have financial hardship, so it won't be limiting access to any of those students. And that was really the only few changes that we made this year. I know that it had substantial revision in the last several years, so there wasn't much to do. Wanted to go ahead and get it in front of you, though, so that we could try to have it approved for December and that we would have it in place in January, because that's when schools start ramping up, getting ready for registration for the following year. So I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have, and I can send you these slides if you would like for me to.
Any questions for Ms. Ray? Thank you, Ms. Ray.
Thank you.
Instructional department updates, Mr. Solly?
My colleagues have told me, I guess, that I get a little long-winded in some of my presentations and stuff. So I told them it's kind of like when I saw Alabama and Ole Miss play, Lane Kiffin said you may want to bring your popcorn. So I may should have brought some tonight. It may take just a little bit, but hopefully it will be informative. I do want to start, and I hate that Hillary left before we did this, but in Alabama, this is Think Alabama Teachers Week. And I do encourage you, if you active on social media or whatever, that's it's a good way to reach out and say thank you to all of our teachers. It is we can't do what we do without them, and they have been heroes, especially over the last couple of years, and working through some very trying times. So maybe now, this year, after everything last year and stuff, maybe now more than ever, a good opportunity to reach out and thank our teachers for what they do. Just real quickly, our expectations, as you're all well aware, especially with our mission statement for our district, we focus on those 4 primary things. We want to have high-quality schools. We want to increase student achievement, advance student opportunities, and have prepared graduates. And a lot of the information I share with you tonight, I hope that you'll see supports that mission statement. Our strategic plan, again, it guides everything that we do. These items here that are highlighted, these 3 especially, guide much of the work that we do in instruction. it really has, if you think about those three things, it really has led to this whole child initiative that Mr. Perkins has supported. And it's been kind of a really neat thing. I hate that they couldn't be here this evening, but with Dr. Ballard and Ms. Witt and Pam Carter and several of our student services people, we've worked real closely even before some of them were here the last couple of years, but with that group here, our instructional departments work very closely. And as I think about this whole child approach, really that student services piece is hitting on that safe, healthy, and engaged. And then our instructional department overlaps in student engagement and then kind of comes in and does the supported and challenged piece of that. So it goes right in line with our strategic plan, but if we think about what instruction does, this is our framework. These are the things that we're most focused on in leading instruction in our district, and obviously professional learning communities has been a major initiative of our district and specifically our instructional department. So I want to talk some about it tonight. I'm going to hit a little bit on reading and math literacy and college and workforce ready in addition. So with PLCs, y'all had the opportunity this summer at your board retreat to learn more about it firsthand from Eric Twaddell. And, just kind of want to take us back 5 years, 2016. We had our accreditation visit, and they were the group that sort of gave us a challenge, okay? They said, you've got some places that you need to function more as a school district rather than a bunch of individual schools. And they left us with this improvement priority to get better at being systemic in these areas. So we fast forward to 2021, and I don't want to steal Dr. Ballard's thunder or Mr. Perkins. We're waiting on our final results and stuff, but these are some commendations that they left us after our review here recently. And I highlighted just a few parts of this. 5 years ago, they said, you're not systemic in this area. Now, 5 years later, you're implemented a consistent and systematic PLC process. You have their words, not mine, but a pervasive collaborative culture throughout your school district that we did not necessarily have 5 years ago. That we have a data-driven approach and that we have a strategic long-range planning mindset that drives what we do instructionally. And all of those things really are grounded in that PLC process. And so, there's everybody in this room and across our districts played a part in making this happen. But it continues to drive our work. We're nowhere near where we need to be. Our schools are working hard to implement those things that we learned about this summer. But I do think it's encouraging that we're heading in the right direction with it. And that was noticed by people coming in from outside of our district that had no idea that was, where our focus has been until they got here. So just real quickly, in 2016, you see that our teaching and learning impact was, as well as all of our other areas, were below the advanced ed, which is what now it's Cognate, was advanced ed at the time, was below their network average. And now, while we don't have our scores back yet, just again, whet your appetite a little bit, but for Madison County Schools results, there's 31 standards that they evaluate in this process. And all 31 of those were at the improving or impacting level, which means that they're happening in a school district. Their words, again, not mine, it is rare that you have a school that doesn't have something in initiating or insufficient. But their words over and over and over again was this process is helping you work at this very, very high level. So once we get our final report back, I think we'll all take an opportunity, and certainly with this board and our superintendent's leadership, has, I think it'll be something to have a big celebration about. It's really, really impressive. So professional learning communities, any questions on that before we go to the next thing? Anything with that you have? Okay. The Literacy Act, This is another biggie for our district. This is, that reading literacy part of our instructional framework. But I talked with y'all last year. You realize that we made a big push to have summer learning, not just for K-3. This is primarily about K-3, but we tried to do it, make it available for all grade levels last year. But really the objective with summer learning is to minimize the effect of summer learning loss. It's not so much to gain ground, but it is certainly not to lose ground during those 8 to 10 weeks that we're away from school. And we really want to change that mindset from a shift from summer school to summer learning and normalize it. I shared with our district leadership staff the other day, we really have to think of summer school and summer learning as our third semester now. It's not an insignificant amount of time. It is a highly specialized, intense opportunity to help some of our most at-risk students. And it functioned much like a regular school year does, with transportation, with CNP, with nursing services, all of those things in addition to teaching staff. But just at a glance for K-3, which was the part of the Literacy Act that this, we invited 1,455 students to attend summer learning camp, and we had 960 that participated, so that was 66%. Obviously, we'd love for that to be higher, but it is invitation. It's not mandatory, and best practice says that that's how it should be. But still, 960 students received 19 days of highly intensive instruction for 5 hours a day, and our data clearly shows that it was effective in how it worked. This is some information that it is important for you as a board to be aware of because of some of the ramifications of the Literacy Act if students don't meet certain benchmarks. But our State Board of Education at their meeting last week approved benchmarks for second grade and third grade based on the ACAP. That's our state assessment, okay? For second grade, 448, and third grade, 452. So this is last year's data. So these were last year's second graders. So our current third graders and last year's third grade and current fourth graders. You can see that if you think about this with the second grade data, these are largely our current third graders, except for those that were retained or moved or whatever. But 13% of those students, if everything stayed the same, could be at risk to be retained. 172. Okay, 13% could be at risk to be retained. So you think about that in terms of teacher units, all right? So the law says that if these students are retained, they really should be in smaller classrooms. So we're not talking about putting them in classrooms with 20 students. They need to be in smaller units. If you just figure 15, what's that? 11, 12 teachers there, roughly. And it needs to be a highly trained teacher. Doesn't need to be a brand new teacher. It needs to be your most effective teacher. So it's going to be, more expensive for this unit. So we know that. We know that we have our work cut out for us to reduce this number. Now, there are students in this 172 that would meet a good cause exemption to not be under that retention requirement. Some of those things related to special education, ELL, whether they've been retained before, okay? So there may be a few of those that wouldn't meet that good cause exemption. But for all of those students, our third grade teachers have to start a reading portfolio on them, okay? And so they have standards that they're to collect data on to show whether these students are mastering that reading standard in their grade level. Should those students not meet the benchmark this spring, they will be, again, invited. We would strongly encourage them to attend summer reading camp. At the end of that reading camp, they would take another state assessment, okay? If they didn't pass that, if they didn't meet that benchmark, then that portfolio could come into play as an opportunity to allow them to advance to that next grade level. So there's several steps to this thing that could play out. But I feel like as a board, you need to understand the numbers we're talking about and not be guessing, is it half of our students or is it 5 kids, okay? You have an idea of what that number could look like for Madison County schools. And I can assure you, right now, there are probably no harder working and more focused teachers in the Madison County School District than a 3rd grade teacher is. They understand the stakes that are on the line for these students and are working tremendously hard to the point, you know, if the expectations keep growing there, I don't know, we may have to have stipends to get teachers into 3rd grade. I don't know, but hats off to them, and we'll see some data here in a little bit that hopefully shows maybe we're
Tim,
going in a better direction.
yeah, I'm sorry. Tim, I have a question.
Yes.
So if a 3rd grader is earmarked or identified for not going beyond the 3rd grade.
Yes.
And they do not go to, I mean, at some point, do we mandate that they go into the summer learning program so that they can, otherwise, how are we going to determine if they don't, then what do we do to determine if they are eligible to advance into the 4th grade?
Yeah. So I don't think we have the authorization to make them come, okay? However, at the end of the summer reading camp, there will be another test administered. We can require them, you will not move on unless you take that test and show that you're proficient on it, okay? If they take that test and they do not show that they are proficient, then their portfolio would come into play. And we could use it to demonstrate that a student is proficient in the essential standards that they're expected to know and be able to do in 3rd grade, and use that as a method for them to be promoted into 4th grade. But that's something that the teacher, the principal, and the superintendent all have to sign off on, for lack of a better term, that the student has met the requirements of that. So there are some things along with that good cause exemption that could allow a student to move on. But I feel like by the end of the school year, or as we get deeper into 2nd semester and you know, there's a lot of uncertainty right now when we will get the results back from the spring test to know who has met that benchmark or not. We don't know how quickly we'll get that, and if that will have any impact on, you know, if we don't get it before the start of summer reading camp, is a parent going to roll the dice and say, hey, you know, I think we had this discussion recently about making it mandatory. You know, you have things like custody situations where a child has to go stay with another parent, relative, maybe out of state. Really wouldn't be fair to them to hold them to a different standard. Probably could be a dozen other somewhat legitimate reasons that they couldn't, but they will be strongly encouraged to attend. And, you know, we'll do everything in our power to make that happen.
Is there an action plan for the families, for the parents to say, hey, look, your kid is here.
Yes.
We see the trending. Here's what we need you to do as parents or guardians to help meet us where they are.
Absolutely. Every student that we identify as being consistently deficient in reading, and it's not just based on this assessment, it's based on our local assessments as well. Every child we identify as being consistently deficient has what's called a SRIP, or a Student Reading Intervention Plan, okay? And part of that plan is that you meet with the parents. Part of that plan is develop an at-home reading plan in addition to what's going to happen during the school day, because we all know that reading is something that can happen outside of the 7 hours they're in school, and certainly something parents can and do play a part in helping their child improve in.
So it's not, it wouldn't be a surprise to a parent towards the end of the school year. I didn't know we were this.
I never say never. I cannot imagine, I can't fathom it.
Okay.
I mean, I can almost give you a 100% guarantee. If it is a surprise, it's not from. I mean, there has been significant effort to make sure everybody is well aware
And
of what's going on.
do you have a percentage of parents that actually want their child to be retained, or?
We get that sometimes, but so far that hasn't certainly been prevalent.
Okay.
That's been a desire for this reason,
Gotcha.
anyway.
Gotcha.
Do we have a instructional coach in every third?
We do. We have a literacy coach in every elementary school full-time. And so they obviously play a significant role in working with the staff there to make sure that they are using the science of reading strategies.
So it's for the school, not just for the third grade?
That's correct. It is for the school. They probably place a little heavier emphasis on second and third grade, but they work with K through 3. It's not for the entire school, it's for K-3.
So is it safe to say the summer learning program is something that we should consider as a permanent thing year after year?
I hope that it just becomes a part of what we do, regardless. I mean, and funding's something we'll talk about in a little while, but for K-3, it'll be mandated. It's not if we want to do it. As long as the law is in place, it's not a nice to have. It's a have to have. The grades above third grade, unless something else is enacted, it's not mandatory. But we certainly are seeing, from our first iteration of it, we've seen some good results from having it.
So this is 2020, 2021, and we don't know when the results from this year's coming, or that?
That's correct. So they'll take the test in the spring. Late May is when our current third graders will be tested. That everybody has worn out the State Department. When will we get those scores back? And so far, we just have not received anywhere close to a definitive date of when that's going to be. But it has been asked, continues to be asked, and hopefully before the testing we'll know that. You probably saw this in the news. Had a lot of, I think there was some people that had some misunderstanding of this at the last state board meeting. Governor Ivey made the statement that she supports and would encourage the legislature to delay the Literacy Act, the retention part of that only. Everything else in the act would continue as normal, just the retention piece. Delay it for a year. Some people took that as governor said it's delayed, it's delayed. No, that's not correct. This is a legislative act. They have to act on it if it's going to be acted on. Otherwise, we are proceeding as if it will be in full force this year, and we're not changing anything we're doing until we know that that's happened. And again, most of it we wouldn't change anyway, because one, the law requires it, but two, it's the right thing to do for our students largely. So we'll know more, in the legislative session as to whether or not the retention piece will remain in effect for this year.
Sorry about that, Mr. Solly. My phone is actually on silent.
Is that
I'm
my
not
timer?
sure how
I'm
that
sorry.
happened.
Dr. Minsky gave you
3
gave
minutes.
you.
Tim.
He just texted me and told me you're overtime. That came from him. so.
And it's good because I was just about to talk about the good name and character of somebody. So anyway, I guess it's good that I sat down. The last piece, assessment, again, just to kind of let you know where we finished up last year and start out with this. And I firm believer things get done only if we can inform and inspire those in a position to make a difference. And certainly those of you in the front of this room, that is a burden that sits squarely on your shoulders, along with most of ours as well. That we have the opportunity to make a difference, and we can do that if we really understand what we need to be doing. So with our data, there's certainly some celebrations, but there's some things that that we understand, that no surprise, that we're going to have to work on. Start with our high school data real quickly. Our graduation rate last 3 years has been very consistent at 95%, even through the pandemic and everything else. That part, our schools have worked hard to make sure our kids get the required coursework and to get them to graduate. Obviously, in 2018-19, you can see that we had worked diligently to make sure that our college and career readiness indicator was equivalent or much closer to our graduation rate. That's the checks and balances of this. We don't want kids just graduating and not having something else there that shows that there's some substance behind that diploma. The last year in 2019-2020, when we dismissed school basically for the last 9 weeks, one of the big factors that impacted our college and career readiness rate, because it was well on its way to being close to that 89%, was it did not give us an opportunity to do remedial work around work keys, which is one of the indicators that we can use for this. So we had a good number of kids that normally that would be their indicator that did not have the opportunity to take and finish that exam. And so we kind of were there. And then this past year, again, roughly out of our juniors and seniors, less than 50% of our students came to school. They did school online. They were not, doing school in person. So to get almost 80% of them college and career ready from afar, I thought was, honestly, I thought it was pretty impressive on the part of our schools. And they were very diligent in making that happen, in making sure that when they did give, whether it was state assessments or other opportunities, that they were able to cajole and convince and somehow hold it over their kids' heads to get them to come in and do that work. So I feel like in a short time we will have that data back the way we would like to see it. Advanced placement, a big deal in Madison County schools. You see the bold numbers there. We had entered into a re-engagement grant with A+ College Ready, which is the state AP initiative. And you can kind of see what happened to our numbers while we were in that grant. The first year of it, the number of tests taken just, super set new records, really did some good work there. In 2020, that AP exam is given during that last 9 weeks of school. We weren't in school. Kids had to change, they had to pivot, they had to take it online. About 80% of our students chose to take their AP exam that year. It was difficult for some of them, and so that was a reason why that 2020 number there decreased from the previous year. We did have an uptick again last year. Did that again while a lot of our students were working remotely. So some things to celebrate here. Our qualifying scores did not reduce dramatically as a result of the pandemic, okay, as a result of kind of doing instruction differently. Our equity score, which is a biggie for us, Again, that's the percentage of seniors who scored a 3 or higher on an exam at any time in high school. That number has continued to rise. And that has been a goal of ours for several years now. We would love for every senior in our school district to take an AP course. And we feel like if they do, the number that will get a qualifying score will only increase. And then the AP scholars, that's any kid that has a qualifying score on 3 or more exams, and that number has continued to grow dramatically. But, you know, we're big believers in this, and our students have seen the results. Very much, I think, the most effective way to prepare them for those, especially that are going to college, very much prepares them for that. This is our ACT, and this is probably the data that out of our high school data, took the biggest hit as a result of the pandemic. Most people are familiar with ACT scores and, you know, that composite score. This is what it was last spring, a 17.9. You can see that's a significant drop. Anytime you're talking 1.5 points on an ACT test, that's big. The good news is we got almost all of our kids to come in and take it, in spite of the fact that they were not in school or face-to-face school. They were online. They were doing school virtually, but they were not in school face-to-face, but we got them to come in and take the exam, which was good. We needed that data. We needed the information. An anomaly in this data was our math data. It did not drop like it did in pretty much every other grade level as a result of the changes in instruction. So that was an encouraging thing. The English score did, and that's a little bit of a head scratcher, just to be honest. This has always been one of our stronger areas on the ACT, and I'm not sure we've got an answer as to why that happened last year, other than the fact that the majority of these kids were not sitting in a traditional, you know, classroom every day, possibly, not sure. But that's our high school data, 3-8. Real quickly, just some things. This is our ACAP data. This is what our 3 through 8, 3rd through 8th graders do. I added grade 11. That's their ACT data on there. That's part of our accountability measures, so you can see that as well. But I just compared it real quickly to the state average, just so you can kind of see where Madison County did versus that. I highlighted in green those that were double digits above the state average, and in ELA, we largely did. We had a solid performance. Our district average was about 59%, nowhere near where we would like to be, but based on previous assessments and where it kind of compared to other schools and stuff, we were in line, I guess I would say, with where we were previously. This is how we stacked up versus the other large top-performing districts, Baldwin and Shelby County, and I'm ticked off. And for the last 15 years, this has been one of our sources of pride, that only 1 year during that last 15 have we not been at the top of that chart. You can see that we're very close to being at the top of that list for ELA, and we've done it in all subjects, but I guess every now and again, you don't need to waste a loss. Sometimes you get beat, and if you have a competitive spirit about yourself, then you want to come back and win, and that has definitely been at the forefront of a lot of our work this year. For math, this is not good. This was a significant hit to our district this year. Not really, I could probably try to sugarcoat it and really highlight 6th grade's good work, but there's not a lot of other stuff on here to be super pleased with. Overall, our district average was around 29%, I believe it is, and but I will say every district took a significant hit in mathematics this year over what they have previously seen on other state assessments. The ACAP test is a technology. It's technology enhanced, meaning that when a student takes it, they're not just answering a multiple choice, not looking for the right answer and maybe guessing right or where. They have to manipulate items on the screen. They have to answer multiple parts of a question to get any of the question right. It's all or nothing. A lot of things about the math test have significantly increased the rigor of this assessment. And I'll just say there is a very wealthy school district in the middle of our state that typically would have 100% of their students proficient on pretty much any test. And they're right around 80% proficient. I mean, like, it had a significant impact, even in districts that have never had dips in their data before, not to make excuses. When you know better, you do better. We know better now. A lot of our focus in our collaborative teams have been focused on ELA, a lot of it due to the Literacy Act and the focus on it. But we have made significant investments, and we'll talk about those in a little while in mathematics to hopefully address that. And again, you can kind of see where we rank versus the top performing large districts in the state. Science, again, 8th grade had a good performance in comparison to the state average, and again, kind of how we stacked up versus those other districts there. This is our ACAP alternate. These are our most significantly cognitively challenged students. Their IEP dictates that they take a different assessment. And so you can see that the majority of those students scored at a level 3, which would be on grade level for them, and or a level 2, which would be just below grade level. That mirrors, if I had this same chart of our ACAP summative data, it would mirror pretty closely, with the exception of level 4. We had a higher percentage of students on summative that had scored at level 4. But most of the kids are in that middle group there at level 2 and 3 on both of those assessments. This is some STAR data. This is a benchmark test we use throughout the year. Just kind of shows, I wanted to show you this just to kind of highlight maybe how the previous year possibly impacted. So this is looking at kids that scored at or above the 60th percentile. So if you think about this statistically, any grade level that's at 40% or higher, that kind of be the percentage you would think would be at or above the 60th percentile, because this is a nationally normed test. So usually our 4th graders come in, got a pretty high percentage of them scoring at a high level. But you see, this is where they came in after having a traditional school year. So the next year when they went to 5th grade, this is where they started after missing the last 9 weeks of school. This is where they went after having, I don't know, what did I call it, a multiple instructional method school. It was dealing with COVID school year, all right? And this is nobody's fault. I mean, this just, obviously we're doing the best that we can do, and I felt like through this we've had good plans, but we have seen some drops in our data. I think that's important for you as a school board to know, and that we have plans to address this, and I feel very strongly that we will be able to do that. K2, we have district assessments. There's not really state assessments for most of the work in those grade levels, but Dibbles, again, just kind of showing you where kids are starting, and again, I could share this with you, and you could look at this. I don't want to belabor it, but I did want to highlight this 3rd grade score here, okay? Because again, more of these kids were in school last year. More of our lower elementary kids went, when we had opportunity to have school, more of these kids were in school. And this is, I think this is very indicative of some 2nd grade teachers working really, really hard to make sure that their third graders were better prepared to be successful on the ACAP for this year. And they've given a lot of kids a fighting chance to get there now, in spite of some of the challenges that we faced. This is our iReady is our math assessment for those grades. Again, I call your attention to this. And this says one grade level below. Don't be alarmed by that, because this is, like for a first grader, this is the test at the start of the year. This is testing where they should be at the end of first grade. Okay, so 74% it's saying are one grade behind. Well, you should be if you have a year's growth this year, then you'll be on grade level at the end of the year. And but this is our challenge right here. We've got to win these kids this way instead of letting them fall back this way. And so that will be the challenge of our staff this year. So I kind of, use this approach with our staff, our school stuff. So what now what? I mean, this is all largely this is summative data. This is an autopsy, all right? We found the body. We can tell you that it is not alive, but we can't change that. We can tell you maybe why it's not living anymore. So we've tried to take that approach with our schools, that's where we are, where are we going? I've shared this with you before, but just as a reminder that with our ESSER funds, we have placed a heavy emphasis on mathematics. As you could see from our data, we knew that before the data came, that we were going to likely take a hit there. Maybe not as big a hit as we took, but still, we've added, in addition, Ms. Rucker, to those literacy coaches in every elementary school, we have a math coach in there as well. I'm really proud of this group working very hard. We've reduced class size. That was partially for mitigation, but it also was to help lower class sizes so teachers could, have lower pupil-teacher ratios with their students. We've added STEM aids to each of our schools so that, again, science, technology, math, engineering, that we're doing those kinds of things in a more hands-on approach, so we're not just doing a traditional classroom. We've invested a lot. A lot of the contracts that y'all have been approving at the board meetings each month are for extensionists, for interventionists, for after-school tutoring. All of those things are coming from this fund source here. We've added these assessments so we know where our kids are throughout the year. And you can see on this side, math labs. We have designated math teachers in our high school to help any of our kids that need additional support there. Paying for all AP exams this year for our students, and having instructional coaches in our high school. Last thing, and I'm done unless you have questions, but this is kind of our challenge, and maybe as a district our challenge. If we're going to transform what we're doing into learning communities, we have to be prepared to know that the traditional guiding model, it doesn't work. It's not, this way of doing school. We're in a post-industrial, we're in a knowledge-based society now. We've got to embrace new ideas and assumptions. We got to think a little bit differently in how we're doing business, and I think a lot of the things we put in place are different than how we've traditionally done business. But if we can change a little bit of our thinking, I have no doubt that we can get our kids back on track. So with that said, questions or comments?
The two other systems we compare ourselves to, do you know how their learning was in school?
Yeah, I believe I'm accurate in saying this. Baldwin probably had more in-person learning last year than we did. We were pretty close with Shelby. I mean, we were very similar, and our data is very similar with theirs. I think it makes a difference. I think things that you can do as a board that keeps our kids in school from an academic, just academic, it's a plus, whatever that is. Keeping kids in school is a big deal, and we know that. That's not news. I mean, but the things you're doing now, the decisions y'all had to make over the last year, the superintendent and y'all, I mean, again, we've had to do the best we could do, but I feel like we're in a better place, and I think we will continue to grow. Thank you.
Any more questions? Thank you, Mr. Solly.
All right. Information on item D. Mr. Smith? You're not Mr. Smith, but
I was going to say, Mr. Smith is
You are a
the
great guy,
tall,
though.
handsome gentleman behind me. Gentleman here. But just quickly, I was just going to remind, in our original meeting, to look at the Phase 4 solution and the change to the electric energy, Snyder Electric Energy Contract Amendment. We talked about that earlier in the year. Since that time, they've had the Snyder team out at these individual schools. They've been doing testing, observing, engineering, et cetera. This is their final report of what they're recommending for these schools. We've sat down with our HVAC teams and agreed that this is a good plan to move forward with. So with that, we brought Todd in to talk to you. You've got the book in front of you, but we're here to answer any questions that you may have on these schools or the systems that we're looking at putting in here. So thank you, and the handsome guy, Mr. Todd Smith.
thanks, Joe.
Good evening. Ooh, dropped my phone. It is always a pleasure to be back in front of y'all. I appreciate the opportunity. And as I always say, this is home, really, because I've been coming here now for 10 years, and we've done a lot of good work together. You can see the picture here is the Riverton roof, which is the last project that y'all approved. We are wrapping this project up, but very, very impressed with just how it turned out. We've got some really cool aerial drone shots of before and after, and really like the color change and everything. And so now that we're moving towards the mechanical replacement portion of what we were looking at, if you remember, a portion of your PSCA funding was kind of held back to do some of these critical HVAC replacements. The reason that we picked these schools in the first place was, one, as part of the first and second phase, we weren't able to get to most of these campuses. They were considered priorities really like 6 years ago. And so with the money coming available, we said we have to get to some of these units because you're challenged with 30-year-old systems in certain places. And really, when you start having 30-year-old systems in school districts, you're just waiting for failure of the system. And so we took in mind a couple things when we were looking at this. Number one, we wanted to make sure that we could meet the exact scope that the operations team wanted. We also wanted to put our fresh eyes on it to make sure that we were bringing you the best solutions, both technology-wise, cost effectiveness, efficiency, all of those things built in. And so there was, discussions and changes over the way. We had literally thousands of hours poured into this project. And our meeting over the course of the last couple of weeks with the operations staff went fantastic. I think, from midterm of where we were to final, we were able to maintain our exact position of what we were going to tackle. We even added a little bit of additional scope that we figured we might need. But to sum it up, and not go through the entire report with you tonight, but to sum it up, the work that we're doing is at 5 campuses. Sparkman Middle School is a complete 100% replacement of all HVAC there. That is by far one of the biggest lifts. It's a variety of different systems. You have some rooftop systems, you have some split systems, you have some VRF technology, but the biggest thing is you're getting rid of the older systems. With all of these replacements, we're going to be doing some things to help increase the fresh air, the cleanliness of the air. We know that that is on topic from everywhere. And so we're doing everything that we can, not only to meet code, but exceed code to make sure that we're giving you the cleanest environments possible. So that's 100% replacement of every single unit at Sparkman Middle. that will be an invasive project. That's going to take time and coordination. And these 5 campuses will span over 2 summers. And then these 5 campuses will also be receiving updated automation servers, which will connect back to the centralized system that the operations staff uses to run your school system. But the really neat thing about the updated automation servers is it gives a little bit of more localized room-by-room control. So some of your teachers right now, for example, at Riverton Intermediate may be hot, and you're only able to control Riverton by a wing. Well, by moving to this newer system, you're able to control down to a room level. So if you pull up a teacher and it's hot, you can say, okay, well, yes, your room is at 77 and the room next door is at 73. There is a problem there. So that'll be a big benefit. The next big lift is going to be Riverton Intermediate. As you guys can imagine, it's been one of the schools that we're trying to get back on track here in terms of facilities and improvements. And it, too, will also be a complete replacement of all the fan coils within the school. That's, I believe, over 130 units, if you can imagine. We also did extensive testing on the piping systems there because we didn't want to be going in with new equipment and older piping if it wasn't good. Our test results figured out that the main piping there is good, but the branch and secondary piping needed work. So we're doing a full replacement from the main all the way to the unit, which is a huge benefit for y'all. On the maintenance side, we're also putting cutoff valves at the unit. So when you need to do maintenance, you can just shut down one room instead of a whole wing. So it's just kind of designing it to be smart and effective when we do this. And so Riverton will also be a very invasive project as well that will be slated for a summer construction. Buckhorn High School will be receiving 2 new wings of systems. We've included rooftop solution, and you're going to be in the current setup right now. Some of the classrooms, 2 classrooms share 1 unit. We're going to be moving to a unit per classroom. That just helps with student and teacher comfort when they don't have to share a single unit there. There will be a small VRF portion on the back older section. Those are some of your oldest units in the entire system, so this is definitely a great move. And we'll be hoping to do some of that work maybe over like fall and springtime and not necessarily needing a summer if we don't need to for that. The other 2 campuses is Career Tech next door, doing a full VRF solution there. We're keeping the existing VRF that you invested there a few years ago, so we're not taking that out. We think that's in great condition, but all the rest of that school will be updated to a new system. And then last but not least, the Board of Ed, which was a priority a long time ago. These fan coil units here are definitely of age. They're loud and they have issues always. And so this is going to be a VRF conversion, which is going to be an individualized, more comfortable control at the office level. And so it will be a fantastic transformation. And so, like I said, the plan is to do this over the next 2 summers scheduled. As you can imagine, in our industry, the lead time on equipment is critical. And so we are aiming for a December order on equipment to be shipped ready to mobilize for summer construction for this summer to be able to hit the ground running. So with that, I just want to commend you, lastly, on utilizing your PSCA funds for what I consider infrastructure and deferred maintenance needs. We work with over 1/3 of the school systems in the state. Not all of those school systems utilize the PSCA money to take care of their facilities. There are systems out there that have used them, for other reasons. And I think that this is a very smart investment of your dollars. And I think you'll renew life into these facilities when you make this decision. So what questions do you have for me?
This may not be a question for you, but I just wanted to make sure our principals are all aware of what's going to be going into their schools. They've seen this or they will see this.
They have seen it.
Okay.
Snyder, they've been in the groups, and they always coordinate one of their things working with Todd and his group, Ash and Hyatt. hey, we need to go out to this school, we need to go and do whatever, and we always coordinate with the principal and the plant manager there so that they know. I think there was one incident where Todd at Buckhorn High School, they were doing testing that day. So we just made a left turn, right turn, whatever came to Riverton to do that. So we're coordinating with those principals, and they've been through this size, probably a little bit larger project than the original one before I got here. So we will definitely work with the principals. Our goal is obviously to upgrade everything. A lot of these units are well over past 20 years old. To coordinate it so that we don't disrupt classrooms, and that when they do get in their classroom, they're comfortable. And that's our goal.
Yeah.
So, yes, ma'am. Long answer for that, but yes.
Yeah, and during construction, we'll be having weekly meetings with the administrators, as well as the plant managers and Joe and his staff, so that everybody's aware of where we're doing work, when we're going to be occupying spaces. Hopefully the buildings, you know, as unoccupied as we can get them in the summer for the major disruptions, but otherwise, nights, weekends, and holidays is when we're used to working. So we've had a lot of coordination meetings, and we feel comfortable with this plan.
I know for myself, the first project you all did, I was a principal at Buckhorn, and we coordinated all the time and didn't ever have a problem with them coming in. So I don't see it changing from that.
So it looks like you guys have done a pretty good assessment of existing facilities. You don't have any concerns that something that you may pop up that you may not anticipate it? Is that, you guys look like you've been pretty thorough, but is there always that I mean, I'm sure there's a possibility, but is there anything major that could happen that we're unaware?
I feel very, very good, specifically about this project for a few reasons. Number one, if you remember, we worked in every single school before in that comprehensive project. So we know those schools very well. We know these specific schools. Number two, we've had our performance assurance support services team working hand in hand with Joe and his staff and Karen and her staff, and we know these schools like the back of our hands. I mean, we come to your school system probably twice a month, walking through the schools. So I think if there was an opportunity for a pop-up, it would be more on like a fresh system that we hadn't been in construction and then under performance for a long, long time. But of course, it's construction. There's always going to be something, but we're good at taking care of those things, and we're going to do right by it. And we usually end up fixing anything that we find, for sure.
How critical are the ones that we haven't gotten to yet? Like, or some out there that,
Like kind of what's the next wave? It's a great question. So when we work with the school system, we always kind of try and break up both their roofing and their mechanical needs into a pie chart, really, of like how old their units are, say what is of age, what's kind of in middle age, and then what's considered kind of new, which is anything 5 to 7 years or younger. The goal is to get rid of everything of age. With this, you're making a huge chunk on hundreds of units of age. There is still work to be done out there, but I'm confident with these 5 facilities, it's going to free up your HVAC staff to go tackle some of the critical units in some of the other schools on a one-by-one basis. And then, of course, if there's additional infrastructure money or anything that's out there, we have our eyes and ears open for you, and we would love to go to the next step. What else is out there? But I think with this, your manpower internally as a school system is going to be freed up to address a lot of the things that right now they're just scrambling, to keep up with a lot of things that are happening at these schools.
So the price tag of this is right at $19 million.
Correct.
And I know that this was agreement way before I got on the board and everything, but so how do we this is a question for the board, I guess. How do we go about doing this without bidding it? I mean, is it not something that we would have to bid?
Yeah, so this project was originally competitive bid under the Article 7 of the state bid law. And so we've been operating under this contract to maintain performance for this school system. This is an amendment to that contract because we are taking further responsibility for this work under our contract. And it's up to us to guarantee the performance of the project to make sure that it meets and exceeds, what we ultimately promise you. If we don't, then outside of typical construction, we're responsible to write you a check for the performance that we miss. To date, you guys have saved over $10 million with Schneider Electric, and we are, meeting and exceeding our commitments. And so that's why this additional work, taking on that responsibility, we're able to do that under a separate subsection of the bid law.
Any more questions?
Thanks, Mr. Smith. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Appreciate y'all.
Information on item E. Ms. O'Bannon?
Good evening. Can everybody hear me? Todd's a little taller than I am. Mr. Solly took all my time, so I'll move quickly. You have a PowerPoint in front of you. I will send it to you electronically. I'm trying to get this microphone placed. But I'm going to share a few slides covering the highlights of fiscal year 2021. If you want more detail on anything that I'm sharing tonight, because it's just a quick summary, just please reach out to me and let me know. This is the summary combined balance sheet of all fund types. We're going to focus on the general fund type where we're reporting, you can see $43.2 million in assets at September 30th. Also note under the account groups, the far right side, that we have $414 million in capital assets right now as of September 30th, and $161 million, that account group on the balance sheet, in outstanding debt, and I'll show you that by warrant in just a minute. So back to operations, the general fund type, we're going to talk in depth about the unreserved fund balance of 38.2, and we'll break that down in just a moment. This is the combined statement of revenues. What's the income statement in the real world, but the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balances reflecting overall $10 million in net operations, you can see in the general fund type. With total revenues and expenditures, this is a summary you're familiar with because I send it to you every month. But this is year end. You can see under general fund, revenues of $187 million and expenditures of $177, and that results in the $10,062 you saw here at the bottom in net operations. Also with that, local and state revenues, when you look at budget to actual, remember general fund is primarily, it is local and state revenues and expenditures. So when you look at that, we had a positive variance with our revenues, and so it's 107, where it represents 107% of the budget. Expenditures, right on track of 102.58% of the budget. So, again, I will repeat at the bottom, you see the unreserved in the balance sheet section of this, the $38.2 million in unreserved fund balance at the end of the year. So the budget looks really good with no unusual discrepancies, the budget to actual, I should say. Remember, special revenue fund type, that represents federal funds and local public school funds, just a small part of that. But all of our ESSER funds that we've been talking about and the Corona relief funds are reported here. And that's the reason, again, that the revenues exceeded the projected budget. We weren't sure exactly what that would look like as far as what we would receive. So for general operations, the excess received over the revenues, again, that's mainly from our property taxes and our sales taxes as they've increased over the last several years. And you can see here again the total millage rates. We looked at this, these rate comparisons during the budget hearings. The latest data statewide ranked Madison County schools, I didn't put this on here, 110th out of 138 school districts in funding per student. So we've improved a little bit. We've gone from 114 to 110th. 110th. We'll take anything with that. But again, the lower sales tax rates that we have compared to the other school districts plays another role in that as to why we have challenges related to funding sources, local funding sources. So, but we are seeing a lot of growth in sales taxes in the past several years, so let's look at that, this comparison. Again, the ad valorem taxes or the property taxes and sales tax revenues continue to grow, as reflected here, with overall increase of, for property taxes, 6.5%, so 1.5 million difference, and 17% in sales taxes, which is really unusual, and that's why we had that positive variance when we were looking at revenues versus actual versus budget. This really looks good. With that increase, remember our 10 mil match will also increase our match requirement for the foundation program to participate, what they take off the top. So for next year, remember, we operate 1 year in arrears. You already know that. But our match will increase from 12.2 to 13.2, over $1 million, because of the increase in those property taxes. So when I bring you the budget next year, when someone brings you the budget next year, hopefully it's me, we will determine that match requirement will be 13.2. That's what you'll see next year, for next year's budget 22-23, actually. Okay, this is the main slide for tonight, the general operating fund analysis. All money other than outstanding purchase orders at the end of the year is shown as unreserved fund balance. However, this is where we are. This $38 million represents 2.6 months of operating expenses, or 78 days. But you say, well, what is in there? And I've broken that down for you as best I could. The 1 month operating expenses, which is required, is 14.7, and it's measured as on a 30-day basis, okay? So that's what we average for 2021. Also in that amount are funds earmarked, like the state supplemental funds carryover, for ETF advancement and technology allocation. We received the $5.2 million in the summer, but actually that's for the fiscal year 22. I went over this in the budget in September. And then the OSR pre-K startup funds also received in August, but it really is to operate for the 2021-2022 school year. We have set aside October debt payments. Our Snyder projects that Todd was talking about for phase 1 and phase 2, we financed the majority of those projects. And so this is what we owe. The good thing is for these next phases, 3 and 4, we're not financing anything, as you'll see in a minute when we look at the summary capital plan once again. So, and talking about that, as we'll see, the capital plan funded locally, we'll need to pull out $5.5 million of this to cover those projects. So our net excess operations after all this is the unearmarked at this point in time, is $10.2 million. And we have several areas of focus, as you know, to consider with the resources that we have available. And I've listed the most significant ones. Again, with the projected growth, we're going to have to continue looking at hopefully capital expansions. I know you're looking at rezoning, but with that, it comes the IT infrastructure needs come with that growth. School safety, we're looking at some alert system enhancements, as well as adding SROs for some of our schools. Student supports, some of the things Mr. Solly mentioned, looking at sustaining some, if we can, of those current initiatives, what we'll do, if anything, after the federal monies, the ESSER monies, are no longer available, what that looks like. And of course, in this current environment with supply chain challenges and the CMP program, we're continuing to supplement that program for food and labor costs, especially with the food cost increasing. And then every year we have some increasing expenditures and obligations with SPED and pre-K mandates. We'll see what that looks like once the legislators go into session. They plan to focus more on pre-K in that program. So for budget purposes, we'll continue to monitor and track these areas in the short term as well as long term. Let's quickly cover some expenditure highlights. As you would expect, as revenues increase, the resources increases, expenditures also have steadily increased. Personnel costs from state and local funds have gradually increased to cover raises, state mandated raises, and the benefits that go with that. And then local funds I've shown for personnel and non-personnel, just local funds. And you'll see during the COVID year, the big hit there, some of our non-personnel costs went down. We're back up to primarily where it has been. Then local and state funds for the special education program increasing as well. Under federal compliance guidelines, we're required to maintain or exceed what we spent the year before in local and state funds for special education needs. So you can see we are in compliance with that as we see that steady increase. Local funds for a pre-K developmental program, I just mentioned that. They continue to rise. And then the one outlier that I just mentioned is the amount of local funds we're pouring into the child nutrition program, particularly this fiscal year 2021 that covered the prior school year. Good note is this year we're back in school, participation is up, and so hopefully that will help as to what general fund is supplementing for that program. We just discussed our ESSER monies through the American Rescue Plan, and this I just wanted, at the budget hearing, I went over how each one of these has been used. Mr. Solly mentioned that again, but these are our funds available, expenditures to date, and then the unexpended balance as of September 30, 2021, as well as the period of availability when those funds have to be spent by. Outstanding debt. Remember on Exhibit 1, we had $161 million in our outstanding debt. You can see the different obligations as far as our warrants, our local school notes, our Snyder leases and warrants and loans there, and then our ADECA grant. We're still paying on that ADECA grant, interest-free. Thanks to Mr. Smith helping with all that years ago, okay? We only owe $145,000 on that thing, and we may just go ahead and pay that off this year. We'll talk about that later, okay? But this includes our local school notes. 2 were paid off this year. You can see the one at Hazel Green High and Sparkman High. The one at Sparkman High was for band uniforms. So what we have left is the $12,152.45 at Hazel Green. That is for band uniforms. The rest are for athletic facilities and enhancements for our athletic programs and facilities. And we will be looking at in just a moment, Buckhorn High School is requesting a loan for $90,000 to upgrade their band uniforms for new band uniforms. We'll see that in a minute.
What was the $3140 that was paid off at Hazel Green?
That was an old, I think, Mr. Weiss, that was an old softball fencing or something like that. It was athletic facilities. Finally, just 2 slides left for capital and maintenance. As we're completing the Lynn Fanning addition, I'll give you totals on that in at least by January, so you'll know the total cost of that project. We're within the budget pretty much. Joe left the room, but yeah, we're pretty close to what we budgeted, the $6 million for Lynn Fanning. It's looking good there. These are our capital projects that you approved for our state PSCA bond issue monies. We're receiving our allocation is $22,912,000. And I've separated the in-house projects that have been budgeted with the Snyder projects that we discussed tonight. This was the budget, the estimates for the capital plan. Also, these are the capital projects that will continue that will come from local and state funds. State funds being the highlighted areas. This is what we have budgeted with our advancement technology monies for deferred maintenance. And so that's some projects with state. The remaining are the, to cover from local funds that I mentioned, the $5.5 million for any overages or anything like that. But that's where the money will come from, our excess money in operations. That's our funded projects. We will ask you, if you vote tonight on the Phase 4 for Snyder, we'll go ahead and show the $2.5 million for the HVAC project at Madison County Career Tech to show that as funded. Right now in the capital plan, it's unfunded from prior projections. Okay? Any questions for me or anything you'd like more information, more detail?
Wait, is the Madison County Career Academy, is that part of Snyder? Or
Yes, it is.
it's not?
Yes, ma'am. It's one of the 5 that we just went over. The $2.5 million,
It's here. It's at the bottom,
it's really a phase 2 to complete the work over there.
but it really is Snyder.
Yes, ma'am. I didn't specify here. On this page, that's the only one. The others are in-house. The reason I didn't put it on this page is because this is from our state bond issue monies. The 22.9 is all state bond monies. This is other funds, other funding sources. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. O'Bannon.
Thank you.
Administrative items. Item A, I recommend approval of the fiscal year-end 2021 financial statements as submitted.
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the recommendation for approval of fiscal year-end 2021 financial statements. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Item B, I recommend approval of the Schneider Electric Energy Contract Amendment, Phase 4, as submitted.
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the recommendation for approval of Schneider Electric Energy Contract Amendment Phase 4. Any additional discussion?
That's what we just went over.
Yes. All those in favor?
Just, and I'm just want to make it very clear, the money that we're using, the PSR, that's bond money that we got from the state, correct? Yes, sir. Yeah. Correct, correct.
Any further comments, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Item C,
I didn't vote on that one.
I was about to say, I didn't vote.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna have to be a no vote on that.
Okay.
okay. Item C, I recommend approval of the South State Bank loan for the purchase of Buckhorn High School band uniforms as submitted.
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the recommendation for approval of the South State Bank loan for the purchase of Buckhorn High School band uniforms. Any discussion?
Is this done through their booster organization?
We went through this process recently, well, a couple of years back, I think at Hazel Green.
Yeah, and then Sparkman just
I was
paid
gonna
theirs
say
off.
Sparkman just finished paying theirs off.
Yep, a lot of hot dogs. A lot of hot dogs be sold on Friday night.
No, I don't like hot dogs.
Well, the booster club is gonna raise the money to pay it back, but but the school system is responsible.
It's a school-affiliated asset. Therefore, we don't want to go back to where parents are
Right.
approving these and signing the loans, so it goes to the school board for approval.
Correct.
The majority of these are all paid back from booster loans. Some schools, though, for those athletic facilities, combine booster monies as well as the TDA monies that they receive for athletics. But in the case of fan uniforms, it's coming from the booster club. And they budget that each year to cover those principal interest payments.
Right.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Item D, I recommend approval of contracts for services as submitted.
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the recommendation for approval of contracts for services as attached. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 I recommend approval. Item E, I recommend approval of the bid as submitted.
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the recommendation for the approval bids. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Item F, I recommend approval of the personnel items and addendum as submitted.
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the recommendation for approval of personnel items and addendum as submitted. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Item G, I recommend approval of supplemental contracts and the discontinued contracts as submitted.
Motion. Oh, second.
I have a motion and a second for recommendation for approval of supplemental contracts and discontinued contracts as submitted. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Well, that is the end of our agenda for the most part, except that we do have an executive session. I think Ms. Thompson has a certification.
That's right, we need to have an executive session to update you on some imminently likely, if the board chooses to continue enforcement action. Legal matters, you also have some issues to discuss regarding the safety exception.
Okay.
We need to have a conversation about.
Okay. All right, we have a couple of reasons to go into executive session. You guys can feel free to hang around if you want to, but I don't blame you if you decide to go. I need a motion and a second to go into executive session.
Motion.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 We will not be voting on anything this evening, but we will adjourn when the executive session's over. Thank you.
Nathan, I'm going to run and grab a bottle of water.